Hey everybody, Sensei James Wall here along with Sensei John King, and on this video we're going to go over the techniques in the wall-to-wall senior or teen adult judo curriculum. This will be for, in our system, what is called semester 2, and in this case that is the months of January, February, March, and April. So we're going to start off with the throwing techniques first, so let's just get right into that. Our first technique is going to be surikomi goshi, the lifting, pulling, hip throw. Now, as I've said on previous videos, and I'll say again, with all of our techniques, there are multiple ways of doing them. And this video is not meant to be an exhaustive resource. It's not meant to show you every single possible variation. It's meant to give you a basic overview of the techniques as a study guide to supplement your training in the dojo on the mat. So in most cases we'll show one version of a technique, maybe a second or third version if we absolutely need to, but this is just going to be the basic version of it. So surikomi goshi, there are multiple ways to throw it. The way that we're doing it now is kind of the more modern way, not quite the nagi no kata version. So what's going to happen here is I want to put my right elbow underneath his armpit, and I'm going to show it from both sides. So from my grip, I would step in and lift him upward, try to get him kind of on the toes a little bit if I can, get the balls of his feet up, and then my right elbow goes underneath his armpit as I complete my turn. My legs should be about shoulder width apart, bend and lift with my legs, and then let my elbow push to complete the throw across. So it's a lifting and pulling action. That's the surikomi part of it, and the goshi, of course, being the hip. Remember, we are lifting with our legs, so you need to bend those knees a little bit. So from this side, right elbow beneath his armpit. So lift, rotate, and throw. So surikomi goshi, lifting, pulling, hip throw. Our next throw is going to be a variation of that, but we do consider it or classify it as a separate technique. This is sode surikomi goshi, the sleeve lifting, pulling, hip throw. Again, multiple ways of doing this. You can throw with either sleeve, with either arm. I tend to always use my right hand, it's my power hand, and drive his left arm over. That's the version I'll be showing today. So from my gripping position here, my right hand's going to release, and I can go underneath his arm and grip his sleeve, or I can go over the top and grip his sleeve. But for me at least, one of the important points is I want to have my fist or my wrist and hand in a good strong alignment. I want to be able to keep my wrist straight and strong as I drive to lift him upward. I don't want to grab in such a way that my wrist is getting bent or compromised here. That's not very strong. If he's your size or bigger, it's going to really hurt your wrist a lot. You're going to have a hard time completing it. So we want to try to keep it like this. I think about punching upward and over. So what I like to do is drop down and go underneath the grip. Get a good strong grip here, and then lift upward here, lifting and pulling. Complete my turn, slight knee bend, and then keep this arm strong and straight to throw him across like that. You have to remember on this throw that your uke, your partner, he can't slap with the hand like he normally would. So when you're initially working on it, you want to be sure you're giving him real good support so he feels comfortable with that. Let's see it from this side. So the right hand releases. I like to go underneath like this, drive up, step in, lift with the legs, and then complete the throw, just like that. Again, you could do it with the left hand if you prefer. I like to do it with the right. So that's sode surikomi goshi, sleeve lifting, pulling, hip throw. Our next technique is sumigaishi. This is the corner reversal. So this is going to be done from pretty much a standard grip. I like to use the rear collar grip for most of my throws, so that's what I'll be using with this one. So for sumigaishi, it is a lot like another throw, tomonagi, the circle throw. But with sumigaishi, we're going to place our foot inside his thigh, here, with the toes pointing in or back, my heel pointing kind of downward. Whereas with tomonagi, my foot goes to his hip or even to his stomach. So this is not that. I'm going to be hooking underneath his thigh. And again, there are multiple variations or multiple ways of doing it. The way that I throw it is with my right leg. I'm going to also throw him over my right shoulder. So unlike tomonagi, where we go straight back and straight over, we go to a corner. So I'm going to go to the right corner. Typically, if I throw it properly with a good circular motion, your uke should be able to roll and come back to their feet. So we're not really trying to do a straight lift and drop, more of a circle. So we're here. I'm going to step in with the left foot to close the distance. Right foot comes up and hooks. Now I want to try to drop in and try to get my rear end, my hips here, under him if possible. So I hook, let my left foot hop in, then I go down and over. Like that. Let's see it from this side. All right, so that was Sumigaishi, the corner reversal. Our last technique is kataguruma, our last technique for the novices, I should say, kataguruma, the shoulder wheel. Now we are going to show this several different ways. It is a slightly difficult throw because we are lifting the opponent completely up onto the shoulders. So we're going to show a couple of acceptable variations. First we'll do the nagi no kata version. I find it's a good way of learning this technique when you're brand new to it. So remember with nagi no kata, for doing the right side, I'll stand with my right foot forward and he'll have his right foot forward. And what he's going to do is take 3 sukiyashi steps forward. So by that I mean his right foot will always stay in front. So he's going to be basically pushing me backward. For my part, as he pushes backwards, I will always keep my right foot forward. So I will step here, here, and here. My feet will not change position. It will be sukiyashi, not a yumeyashi or normal foot walking. So with the nagi no kata version, as he pushes, the first time I fade back. The second time I'm going to fade back, but I'm going to let my left hand release on the outside and bottom of his sleeve. It's going to come to the inside, and I'm going to grip close to the elbow, upper forearm area. As he makes his second push, I'll pull his arm up and break his grip. Now on his third push forward, I really want to extend his body up over my shoulders and make him be off balance to the front. So as he pushes, I pull very strongly. And as I'm making that pull, I drop my right arm down underneath his leg. So what I don't want to try to do is physically pick him straight up. It's a lot of pressure on my back to do that. So instead, I use this high grip and I tilt. And if you'll notice, he's kind of supporting himself in the back just a little bit with that hand. So the real hard part I find when learning this at first is to understand you're not reaching down and picking them up. That's very hard to do. Rather, you are placing yourself here and then stretching them out and tilting them to lift them up like that. And once you make that action, that big strong kazushi off balance to lift and tilt, it makes the lifting of the weight much easier. You probably still want to do this at first with a person who's smaller, lighter, and at least your height or taller. It's going to make it easier learning the basic technique. So a standard way of doing that without the 3 pushes would be for me to grab on the inside here, drop myself in close here. But again, this hand, I want to pull. I want to tilt him upward like that, not try to pick him up bottom. Now, it's also acceptable in our curriculum for you to do a drop knee version of this throw. If you're not able to physically do the big lift because of size or relative strength, or you just don't feel comfortable, you can do a drop knee version. That can be a single drop knee, or you can drop to both knees. So a single drop version of that would look like this. Gripping the inside of the sleeve, I would drop down to one knee here. Again, don't pick him up, tilt him over to complete the throw. And of course, if I were going to do a double drop knee version, it would be dropping to both knees. Notice my posture is good and tall and straight. I'm not bending over here, putting all that pressure on my back. I'm here, and then I tilt here. And of course, I can complete the throw across just like that. Really important, if you're going to do either of the drop knee versions, make sure you feel good and strong and in control. What you don't want to do is drop them over backwards. Number one, it's illegal in judo. And number two, a lot of times your toes are on the mat, either both of them or just one of them. And if they fall here onto your heel, it's going to hurt you quite a bit. You may tear or break some things in your foot. So the direction to finish the throw is either across or it's right off the toes. You can lift and throw to an angle right here. So that's kataguruma, shoulder wheel. Now we have two throwing techniques here that are for our advanced players. That's going to be brown belt and above. Remember, brown belts and above, those 4 techniques you have to do, plus these. Yellow, orange, and green belts, you do not have to do these techniques for promotion. It's always a good idea to learn them, but you're not going to be responsible for them. The first one is called hikikomi gaishi. This is a rear fall reversal. It's really, really close to sumi gaishi. Some people actually consider them the same throw. We do differentiate between the two. The only real difference is the grip that we utilize. So for hikikomi gaishi, I'm going to pretend maybe that my opponent is slightly defensive. He's kind of hipping out and bending over. His posture's not really good. So what I want to do is break free of my right hand, and I'm going to drive it over his shoulder and try to grab his belt. When I do that, I'm going to pull his shoulder into my armpit real tight. So I shoot over the shoulder and I pull him in tight. Now if his belt weren't there, I could grab his gi top or even the top of his pants. But if the belt is there, we'll take it. With my other arm, notice I'm trapping this arm close to my body. I don't want him to be able to put it out and post and do a round off or a turn out of this throw. So I've got him here. Now my left foot is going to come up close, and that lets my right foot come up and hook inside the thigh, just like we did for sumi gaishi. I sit underneath and throw him over just like that. Last technique for the advanced players this semester is going to be kind of a not exactly a combination, but sort of a, I guess kind of a counter defense combination. It's going to be my opponent taking a high rear collar grip, and then a duck under happens. So what happens in this instance is my opponent has received or taken this high collar grip on me. It's a very powerful grip. Now I don't want to let this happen if I can help it, but if it does happen, I certainly don't want to stay here. So one option for this would be for me to go ahead and grip the sleeve, fist up, knuckles up, and then do a duck under like this. From this position, I can use my hand and also a shrug of my shoulder and body to break his grip free. And this is going to actually be now a left-sided Sode-Suri Komigoshi. So I'm going to drive with this hand as I step across, lift, and throw. Let's see that from this side. He's got that rear collar grip. That's really bad for me. So I grip, duck, break the grip. Remember, we have to drive upward. Make sure your fist is strong. Then step across, bend the knees, lift, and throw. So that is our Sode-Suri Komigoshi taking place from a duck under. Okay? We have a counter or defense in this set, which is the hip twist block when someone tries to throw us with Sode-Suri Komigoshi. So let's look at that from both angles. So in this case, my opponent is attempting to throw Sode-Suri Komigoshi. So he wants to drive my arm up and step his hips right in front of me like this. So if I let him get that entry, he's probably going to throw me. In this case, my hands are tied up. I'm not able to block his hip or lower back with my hand like maybe I would if it were free, but my hip is still available to move. So as he moves and starts his entry, I'm going to take my hip and I'm actually going to just twist it and bump into him like this. If he continues trying to pull, I'll use that motion to step around him. And now, of course, I can launch a counter technique of some sort. So let's see it from this side. He starts his Sode-Suri Komigoshi. I twist to block him out here and then get out of that danger position. We never, ever want to stay, as I call it, stay in the hips. We don't want to keep that hip-to-hip contact with him unless we know we're going to take control and move a counter technique. We stay behind him with his hips in front of ours, he's probably eventually going to figure out the position and make a throw happen. Okay? We have a couple of combination techniques for the advanced players. The first one is going to be Osoto Makikomi as the primary throw, and when that fails, we transition into that Hikikomi Gaishi that we saw earlier. So for Osoto Makikomi, I would have this strong grip, And what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to step in here and throw him backwards with Osoto Makikomi. But what sometimes happens is, this guy is real strong. I don't get the off balance I need. As I try to hop in, he's pushing me back. He's pushing me forward like this. So instead of playing this power game to see who's stronger, I'll just lock him in tight, and I'll move my leg, my foot, from behind his knee. I'll just make a little circle here. And I'll transition that to Hikikomi Gaishi. That's our first combo for the advanced players. Our second one takes place on the ground, so it's a combination. It kind of combines one of our throwing techniques that takes place from the knees into one of the joint locks we're doing this semester. So it's a kneeling Hizaguruma, and we're going to use that to get into our arm lock for this semester, which is called Hizagatami, the knee arm lock. So the way we could practice this would be if our opponent is here and we're here, and I've got this grip on him, I'm going to use my right foot to block his thigh, and I'm going to fall kind of backwards at a slight angle. And what I want to do is keep his leg back, and I want to stretch him out. So he ends up either kind of on his hands and knees, or maybe even down on his chest a little bit. But what's important here is while I'm blocking his body moving forward, this left hand is going to be pulling strongly on his arm. And I want to have it as straight as I can. I want to really stretch it out. So what I would do here is I would step in with my left knee, block his thigh, and then fall backwards here. So if you notice, I've got that arm nice and straight, I'm pulling real strong, and I've got this big open space. I'm going to bring my knee up, place my foot on his hip or into his ribs, and use my knee downward on his elbow here to execute the joint lock. So to finish that lock, it helps a lot if as you're pulling, you get his hand up to the crook of your neck. You can sometimes make it work with his hand here on top of your chest, but it will work a lot better if it's up high on the shoulder. Let's see that from this side. So this works great if, for example, he's already taken a rear collar grip. He's already placed the hand there for you. So I'm going to block, stretch him out. Notice how straight the arm is. Keep that pull going, toes to the hips or even into his ribs. Bring the knee up, downward pressure to lock it on the elbow. So kneeling Hizaguruma into Hizagatami, our knee arm lock. So that's going to be it for throws and for combinations and for counters and defenses. Okay guys, in this segment we're going to cover the pins, the chokes, and the joint locks for semester 2 of our teen adult judo curriculum, January, February, March, and April. So let's start with the pinning techniques. We have 2 in particular that we're covering this semester. First one is going to be Kuzure Kami Shiho Gatami. So in this instance I have my opponent or partner here on his back. Our traditional Kami Shiho Gatami upper 4-corner hold would take place here right above his head, and I would go under both shoulders, grab the belt. For this Kuzure Kami Shiho Gatami, remember Kuzure means modified, so it's just a variation of the upper 4-corner hold. So in this case what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be off to an angle, so I'm going to be off over one of his shoulders. And there's multiple different things we could do with the hands as long as we were pinning him. The way that I typically do it, and the way it's taught in Katami no Kata, for example, is I would have his arm here. I would actually be wrapping underneath his armpit and elbow, and I would be grabbing the top of his jacket here with this hand, just like that. So I would be holding him here with that hand, chest onto his chest, and my other hand would be underneath this shoulder, gripping the belt, and I would hold him tightly, just like this. Of course, again, the arms can be in multiple different positions. This arm could be over the top, like this if I needed it to be. So the main thing that makes it a modified version is going to be the angle that we're taking as opposed to being directly above the head, and that was commonly called the north-south position. Our next one is what I've always heard called or been referred to as the English hold. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, many times it's referred to as an S-mount. This is kind of similar to S-mount, maybe not exactly the same thing. The way that we typically teach it or do it here at our school starts from a Jujigatami or crossbody armbar, but the opponent has managed to double up. He's managed to protect himself. So if I were here in this position for the crossbody armbar, but he had doubled up, and I had tried to break this and had been unsuccessful at doing so. In judo competitions, even in freestyle judo, we're not going to have an unlimited amount of time to break this. In freestyle judo, of course, we're going to give you a lot more time to work on this than possibly you would get in an IJF rules event. But at some point, if you don't break this or transition to something else, we will eventually call mate, you'll have to stand up. So we don't want to give up this position that we've gained. So one thing we can do is we can convert this into a pin. And one way to do that is to switch my hands by grabbing them together and bringing the upper arm, the one closest to his head, through his elbow, and then we could grab our own jacket lapel if we wanted to, but the point being we want to keep pull here. We want to continually be placing some strain on this, so at any point if he releases his grip, I'll complete my arm bar. Now to transition to a pin, I'll take my lower leg and my heel, I will hook it right under his tricep, right by his shoulder blade. I'll use that to help me pull, and I'll reach over with my lower hand and I'll grab here onto his pants. Now my left leg, in this case the one above his head is my left leg, I'm going to bring it back here and use it to help me lift myself up. So in some cases we end up right on top of them and they're on their back, but most of the time we end up sort of pulling them partially onto their side. And so this resembles what some people in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu call an S-mount. It's not exactly the S-mount, but it's very close to it. So if I could get this position and keep him at least partially on his back, in Judo this would be considered a pin, it would be osaikomi. So I could continue to hold him here, and we just refer to this as the English hold. That's the way that I learned it many, many years ago. Of course, any time here, if he happens to release his arms and try to turn to get away, I could step back over and then complete the arm. So that's what we refer to as the English hold. You don't necessarily have to start out in Jujigatami to get there, but that's the way that we teach it. So that way you don't lose that position you've gained where he's on his back, he's on the ground. You just don't want to lose that and have to stand back up, possibly get thrown and lose the match. So we'll convert that into a pin and at least get some points for it. Next we have our choking techniques. Our first one is kataha jame. This is the single wing choke. Can be done from a variety of positions and ways. The traditional way that we do it is here from behind the partner. And so what's going to happen here is one arm, the left arm, is underneath his armpit, and I use it to open his lapel. My right arm goes over the shoulder, and the thumb goes inside his collar, deep up beside his neck, and I'm going to hold tightly. Now with my left arm, I'll bring his arm up and out, and then I'm going to drive the knife edge of my hand over behind my head, behind his head. And what I like to think about here is trying to take my hand and if possible touch my own shoulder or bicep, and then we slide that down, kind of like a cutting or scissoring action. So my forearm is pressing his back of his neck forward. We're not grabbing the back of his neck and driving his neck forward, we're grabbing the back really low on the bottom, almost to his shoulder blades, just to help us increase the force of the choke. So again, we open here, thumb inside, over, back, down. The right hand pulls up and over to complete the choking technique. And again, this can be done from a variety of positions. We typically teach you the basic version from that back position, maybe the seated rear mount. It's kataha jame, single wing choke. Our next choke here is ryote jame. This is the two-hand or double-hand choke. It's also sometimes referred to as a knuckle choke. It's a personal favorite of my wife, Sensei Patty. She loves to do this from a variety of positions. It's really important with this. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine as a referee. We're using the knuckles to execute choke. What we're not doing is taking our knuckles and digging them in to the back of his actual neck here. There's no arteries there. We're not choking him. We're not cutting off the blood supply. All we're doing if we push our knuckles in back here, we're just causing pain. And in my opinion, that's against the spirit of judo. If I see a player doing that, if I'm refereeing the match, I'm going to call mate, give him a verbal warning. If it happens again, he's going to get a penalty for it. You're not going to choke him from here. So for this to actually choke, we need the knuckles to get around to the sides of his neck. We want to be here in the area of the carotid triangle, so we're actually starting to cut off the blood supply. Now, most people are actually going to tap because it hurts. It is a painful choke. But if they don't tap and we continue, if we continue applying pressure, then we will eventually get the choke to occur and they'll pass out. So we're going to grab with our fingers inside the lapels and our thumbs on the outside, and we want to pull that collar tight across the back of his neck. And I like to put my index or pointer finger right below their earlobe, and then we wrap our knuckles around and press inward like that. So it's not so much me trying to push in, it's more of me wrapping in this manner. So that's for yote jime, the two-hand choke, also sometimes referred to as a knuckle choke. One of our arm bars this semester is called the leg diving jujigatame. So remember, jujigatame is crossbody arm bar. This is being executed from the guard. It's the same arm bar. The only difference is a slight modification to the entry. Sometimes I find this is easier for beginners to execute. It's also a little easier for your heavier students. Maybe they have a little bit of difficulty with their hip movement or getting their head and shoulders and hips to move to get the proper angle for the arm bar. So I'll start here on my back. All the same rules for our crossbody arm bar that we've talked about before still apply. If I'm executing the lock here, I want to get control of this arm. I want to try to trap it close to my body and execute good here. I want to have this foot to his hip, and I'm going to let my knee close up. So I'm kind of using my knee to help reinforce my control of his arm. Now I'll use my right hand to execute that leg dive. So I'm going to actually push it underneath his leg. And so sometimes new students or slightly heavier students have a hard time getting from here over to the side. So by grabbing the leg, we can use that to pull ourselves around to this position. Now the left leg comes over, we bite down deep. We could finish the lock from here or use this leg that we now have a grip on to help us sweep him over here onto his back to finish our joint lock from there. So let's do that with my uke on this side. So control his arm, his hip, and his shoulder. This leg slides up underneath the armpit here. This is going to grab, pull myself around. I could execute the lock here or upset his balance and finish the arm bar from here in the traditional manner. So that's our leg diving jujigatame. Our next technique is hizagatame. This is the knee arm lock. So basically I maybe start for an ude-gatame, a shoulder or arm lock, and I use my knee to complete that action. So if I'm on my back and my opponent is here in my guard, what I want to do is get his hand, his wrist here to the crook of my neck. And then I need to turn on my side. And I like to turn to my right side and get my hips slightly out from under him to make a space. And I'm going to show it from the other side as well. So if I have control here, I'll get my hands to his elbow, and then I'll use some hip movement to move out and to the side. And you can't see from this angle, but I'm putting my right foot on his hip so he can't continue to pass my guard. So I want to pull his arm real strongly, and then I'll use my knee. Toes can go right into his hip, and I'll bring the knee up and execute an elbow lock with the knee. So let's see that from the other side. The space here is very important. One common mistake with ude-gatame or hizagatame is that people place the opponent's arm onto their chest and torso. And you can still execute the lock from there, but you're greatly limiting the range of motion you can achieve to execute your lock. So I want to get control here, get his wrist to my shoulder, foot to his hip. We can use this to help us make space and get to the side. So now you'll notice I've got probably a foot or more of space between his elbow and the mat. That's a lot of room that I can push his elbow joint into. Use my chin and ear to keep control of here, hands here, toes to his hip or to his ribs, and then I'll bring that knee up. And I'll use the knee along with my hands. I might keep the hands below it or place the knee here, grab. But either way, what I'm doing is using my arm strength and my knee to execute this hizagatame or knee arm lock. So pretty effective technique that not a lot of people utilize these days. It's largely forgotten about, I think, and it's actually very effective. It's one of my favorite locks. Next we've got a couple of techniques. One is going to be ashi jujigatame. So this is going to be actually a leg lock Remember that leg locks are not legal in judo, either IJF or freestyle judo, but I do think it's important that you learn at least some basic leg and ankle locks. They are legal in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Sambo and other styles of submission wrestling, so you want to at least have a basic knowledge of these techniques. So in this case, we're basically doing a crossbody leg lock. It's the same thing as the crossbody arm lock, except to his leg. So instead of his elbow joint, we're attacking his knee joint. So one very easy way to practice this is with your partner on his back, with his legs facing you here, and you simply select the leg you're going to lock. In this case, I'll attack this one. We lift it up nice and straight, and then in this case, I've got my right foot close to his hip, so I'll take my left leg, and I'm going to just step around and step right between his legs. Be sure you don't kick your partner when you do this. So I'll step around and step in here. Now I'm going to fall back at an angle and pull his leg to me. So you'll notice his knee is here. It won't go any straighter than that. I want to squeeze my knees on his knee the same way I would squeeze my knees on his elbow for the arm lock, and then I'll pull this back toward me like this. You might also use your feet to keep his other leg out of the way, like this. Some people also cross the ankles and lock his leg out like that to keep him over there, and then execute your lock here. Now, the direction that you step is completely up to you. I like to step to the outside, but you could also step with your right foot right through the middle here and execute the same technique from there. No reason at all you can't do it that way. There are multiple ways to enter that technique. That's just one. It's the basic way that we typically teach it, and it is acceptable for promotion in our system. Next, we've got a couple more versions of Jujigatami, the crossbody arm lock. Same arm lock, two different ways to get the position. These both occur when the opponent is on their back and I'm on top of them in Tate Shihogatami, or what's commonly referred to these days as the full mount or the top mount. So the first way is what we refer to as a spinning Jujigatami. In this case, I'm putting downward pressure on the opponent, kind of really squeezing him hard, putting a lot of weight to him. And what I'm hoping he does is react by trying to bench press or push me away. Maybe get him to panic just a little bit from my weight and pressure. So what I'm looking for is my opponent to actually give me a straight or almost straight arm. And I have to be ready to take advantage of that. There's a couple different ways you can do this. The sort of traditional way was that I encircle the arm I want to lock by placing one arm on the outside, one arm on the inside, and I make a pyramid or a diamond, and I place my hands here, right on his shoulder, and then I would, or chest and shoulder, and I would push upward and then spin around. It's a little bit kinder if you have a co-ed class, you have males and females. We want to be conscious of our female training partners' differences in anatomy, and so instead of circling and placing the hand here on the chest, what we commonly teach is the arm that goes on the outside goes thumb down right in the armpit, and the other one goes underneath the opposite armpit with the thumb facing up. So we're just like this. So we go here and here. And we use this along with our legs to help us pop up and spin around here. We want our hips real close to his shoulders. We want to squeeze our knees tight together. We can hug or grab, roll back, squeeze tight with the knees, and slightly and slowly lift our hips. We don't want to ever do this real hard and fast in training. We might hurt our partner. All right, another version of this, and I find that this version is probably easier for novice level students or for your heavier weight students, your big guys. You might want to use what we call a climbing or a knee climbing Jujigatami. In this case, my opponent has framed up. He's brought his elbows in real tight. Maybe I put pressure on him. He doesn't fall for it. He doesn't give me that bench press. So what I'm going to do is use my knees, and I'm going to slowly climb or walk them up his ribs. And what I want is for my knees to cause his elbows to kind of spread out like that. So I've got him here. I'll start to slowly climb up his body here. So now I've got this position. His arms are out to the side. I've kind of broken his frame largely. I'll reach inside this elbow, grab his bicep, tricep, or shoulder area, and now I'm going to lift him to his side, and I'll pop my knee on that same side up. So I might use my hand to help me lift up. So I'll go from here to here. So some people refer to this as an S mount. And you'll see here, I'm squeezing him real tight. I wouldn't want to have all this space. It's going to be easy for him to shrimp forward or backward and get away. So I want to squeeze him real tight. Now if I'm able to, I can just pop this leg over in one motion, or for beginners or heavier folks, if we need to, we could take a series of small steps. We could step, 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 and execute Jujigatami from here. I find that this is a really good version to teach to your beginners because they can move very slowly. There's less chance of them losing control and losing the position or going too fast and hurting their opponent. So again, we call that the climbing or knee climbing Jujigatami from top. All right, so that's your pins, your chokes, your joint locks for semester 2. All right, we are going to cover the miscellaneous mat work and self-defense techniques for semester 2 of our teen adult semester. This is going to be January, February, March, and April. So miscellaneous mat work and self-defense. Let's get right into it. The emphasis this semester was a lot of Jujigatami, a lot of crossbody armbar. So you're seeing Jujigatami this semester in a lot of different ways, a lot of different positions. That continues into miscellaneous mat work. This first one is going to be a Jujigatami from the side when our opponent is turtled up. I've also heard this referred to as a bull rider choke or bull rider armbar. I'm sorry, bull rider Juji or a bull rider armbar. So I'll have my opponent hands and knees, his head toward the camera, so maybe you guys can see what's happening here. So in this case, he's kind of turtled up. What I'm going to do is take the arm or hand that is closest to his head. In this case, that would be my right one. And I'm going to go underneath his armpit and I'm going to grab his lapel. And I like to grab right about shoulder level. I don't have to be up behind his head, but I don't want to be low on his torso. I want to be here to really affect his arm. So I'm going to get that grip real tight, fingers in, thumb out. Now my right foot stays right here beside his elbow and his arm. And with my left foot, I'm going to pop up and I'm going to swing it around and step here as well. If you need to do that in a couple of steps, you can. I find it helps a lot if I put my arm here. Helps me to lift, also helps me keep him where I want him to. It makes it hard for him to pop up and get away. So I'm going to pop my body up, step around here. Then I'm going to go backwards and pull real hard. And you'll see his arm kind of pop free. In some cases, if they're not ready, the arm will pop totally up. If they're turtling up really tight, I may only get the elbow up like that. But that's okay, it's exposed it. I've got my legs in position, one on each side of his arm or elbow. I keep this grip laced through, then I just have to work to finish the Jujigatami armbar. It's also advisable to grab that arm to start your armbar as soon as possible. You don't necessarily have to wait until you're flat on your back. As soon as that elbow pops up, you can go ahead and grab it with your free hand. From the same position, we have one choking technique we're doing, and I've also heard it referred to as a bull rider choke. On your curriculum material, it's going to be called a lapel choke from the side versus the turtle. So in this case, instead of going underneath his armpit, I'm simply going to go over the shoulder, and I'm going to go thumbs inside here, up high for a choke. And I do the same thing as I did in the previous technique. My right leg stays close to his elbow. I lift myself up and step over. Then I'm going to slide down to the ground. I will pull with my arm while I push with my legs and execute this choke. So what's happening here is this is being pulled across, but my leg is pushing him this way into the choke. So lapel choke from the side versus the turtle. Got a couple more Jujigatami variations here now. This next one we call a jackknife turnover into Jujigatami. That's the only real description or name that I've ever heard for it. It's a really cool little technique. I've seen it work a lot of times in competition. Not very hard to execute. In this case, the opponent is on his stomach. He's turtled up down on his chest or stomach. So what I'm going to do is let my right hand get the back of his collar, and then my left hand is going to grab his left elbow. And I need to do a couple of things. I need to lift him up a little bit in the front. I need to jam my knee under this armpit. I want his elbow to end up going out, just like that, and my knee under his armpit. So I like to step up here with the right foot, lift him up, and then, oh, got your hand, John, you okay? Slide underneath real tight, just like that. So now my knee is real deep under his armpit, and I'll let my foot go on top of his shoulder, and I'll close it in as tightly as I can. If I can touch my heel to my knee, I will. As long as I'm getting real close to it, there should be some pressure here as I'm squeezing it with my knees. And that's kind of exposed this arm. I'll just hook it, rotate, drop, and before I hit the ground, I'll go ahead and start transitioning this leg over the top. So now we're in our traditional Jujigatame position. Squeeze the knees together, finish the elbow lock. All right, we have another Jujigatame here. This one we refer to as Jujigatame from Superman. It could also be called from the airplane position, which seems kind of funny, but it actually is a pretty effective technique. You can execute this one if you catch the opponent just as he stands up to try and pass your guard, or if he's already standing and you're kind of fighting in a high, kind of what we call a high open guard position, and maybe he makes a mistake, gets a little too close to you, lets himself lean over a little bit too far. You can experiment with whether you want to use the sleeve and lapel or a double sleeve grip, see what works better for you. It'll work either way. So in this case, I'll start from here, and I've got my right foot blocking him here, and I've got this sleeve, and in my case, I've got this lapel. Again, you could have double sleeves if you want to. The other foot goes to his hip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull him and lift him up here. We call it a Superman position, but some people also call it an airplane. Like you give your kids an airplane ride. If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. So as I've got him up in the air, I'm going to remove the left foot so that he can fall down onto his back and side, and that leg's going to circle around. So when he lands, I'll be in the Jujigatame position. I'm going to go from here and from here. I'm going to bring him up and then bring him down, just like that. So it's one of these techniques that can be hard if you make it hard. Don't overcomplicate it. Once you lift him up here, this right foot is going to be pushing him that way. If I just move my left one out of the way, this foot will push him over like that. It's just a matter of kind of guiding him, using your foot and using your control of his arm into the position you want. He doesn't necessarily have to go all the way over here. I've seen some people do it where Uke lands right here with his head right there. And that works just fine as well. All right, the next one is a Jujigatame turnover from the rear. A few different ways you can do this. I'm going to show the way that I do it. So in this, what I'm going to do is I want to get my left hook or heel into his hip. So I'm going to step up, get my left heel in real deep. It's pretty important. And you can hook in his arm with your lower arm or with your upper arm. If you can do it with the upper arm, then your lower arm is going to be free to help you with the roll. The hardest part about this technique, I find, for people is getting the shin to go on the back of his neck and head so that we can push his head underneath. We want to do that so he can roll over. If his head stays out straight like this, it stops our roll. We want to have him tucked like that. So as I make my maneuver here, I'm going to take this knee and shin, and I'm going to bring it down here and shove his head and neck under. Then I'll hook, grab my own lapel, and that left heel now goes all the way back. It actually hooks into his leg the same way it does for the Sumigaishi throw. I can lay myself forward, grab his pants with the free hand, pull, and roll him over. Now as we complete that roll, his momentum is moving him upward to sit up. So before he can do that, we want that right leg to come up and catch him and bring him right back down here, just like that. So this is one of those techniques. It's difficult to show it on video because there's a lot of small details happening underneath that it's hard to see. So again, refer to my previous statement. I want you guys using this just as a guide, just as a refresher. It's not going to be enough of the exacting details. You're going to need to get that in class. Okay. Let's go ahead and stop with those techniques, and we'll come back in the next session and we'll do the self-defense techniques. All right, guys, let's wrap up semester 2 of our adult curriculum with the self-defense techniques. Most of these, or actually all of these, are going to be grabs from the front. Now with self-defense, maybe even more so than with our regular judo techniques, there is a lot of room for interpretation, a lot of room for variations for you to kind of experiment and find what works good for your body type, your size, your strength, your ability levels. So these are going to be some baseline techniques. If you don't know anything else to do prior to this semester, learn these techniques. But as you move forward, as your martial arts knowledge improves and you get better and stronger and faster, more capable, feel free to re-examine these techniques and determine what makes sense for you. If you need to modify these, to change them up, that's perfectly okay. Everyone's self-defense is going to be different. Everyone's judo is going to be a little different. Once you reach brown belt and black belt level, you start to realize that. So let's work on these self-defense techniques. This first one is the opponent, or the bad guy here, has approached me, and he's called a cross wrist grab. So he reaches across with his right hand and he grabs my right hand. So he reaches to grab. A lot of things we could do here. What I'm going to do is what's called a Y. So I put my fingers out like this. Looks like a Y here in the middle. So what I'm going to do is pop up like that to break his grip. And then I'm going to simply rotate my body over, placing his elbow into my armpit, and perform a technique we call wakigatami, the armpit arm lock. So as I break his grip up, this arm goes over, and I'm going to grab the wrist here. So I have both my hands on his wrist, rotate, place his elbow in my armpit, clamp it down, and I'm going to bend my knees and put pressure on his elbow. I'm not going to bend over. Let's see that from the other side. So he grabs my wrist, I move up, grab with the other hand, rotate his arm so his elbow is up, his elbow in my armpit, I clamp down tightly, then I push down on this side, pull up on this side as I lower my knees. Now notice I maintain a lot of distance here. A very common mistake at first with this technique is we get this position and we turn inward like this. And that's really exposing me to being punched, or for him to throw me backwards. He's into my hip, so to speak. So we want to make sure we maintain this safe distance and good strong posture, not bending over. If my opponent were to start advancing on me before I finish this technique, I could move away from him here until I'm able to lock this out. Also remember that there is absolutely the opening for me to execute a wrist lock or wrist press here if I feel I can't execute the elbow lock. All right, that's our cross wrist grab. Next one is the same side wrist grab. So in this case, he grabs. Same thing, I'm going to execute this Y upward, stepping across, and again executing my wakigatami. So let's see, that technique can work from either of those, from the cross wrist grab, popping up, or even cross wrist grab from before, moving to the outside here, or from the same side wrist grab, which we just executed. Next is our double wrist grab. He's got me here. So a lot of options that we have here, a lot of different things that we could do. What I like to do is what we call a missed clap. So I'm going to let my hand come across and break his grip free. Or another favorite technique is to step back with my left foot, turn my body, and then snatch my right hand away, make a fist. This could be a hammer strike to the temple or jaw, or it could be a knife edge strike into his neck. I prefer the hammer fist right to the temple and jaw to hurt him and distract him and kind of daze him a little bit. Then gripping, again, two hands on his wrist, rotating. I can execute wakigatami, or same technique, striking. We could control his elbow, execute an elbow lock takedown, and finish with an arm lock here. So again, there's multiple ways to finish, and feel free to kind of experiment, try a couple different things, see what works for you. Last technique in this semester is a front two-hand choke. The opponent has grabbed me with two hands here. Some people call it a Frankenstein choke or a rape choke. So he's got me here. So what I'm going to do is use my left hand to trap his right hand here to my body. I'm going to bring my arm straight up, and I'm going to rotate my body, turning right to left, and let this come across to break his grip. So I come up and step back. But I'm holding on to this so he doesn't completely get away from me. This puts me in great position for a rear elbow strike. In this case, I'm going to finish with a judo technique, an osotogari. So I rotate my hand, grab him, step in, and I throw osotogari. There's a multitude of different ways you could finish that technique as well. Important thing with this technique is to remember when he grabs, trap, and I'm not using just my arm strength to try to knock his grip free. I'm actually turning with my whole body before I execute the strike. All right, that's your self-defense techniques for this semester. Again, this is just a rough guide. We'll get a lot of work on these in class. We'll see you guys on the mat.